What if we could learn from outstanding leaders in business, sports, and education from some of the best voices in corporate America? Lighting the Path is a series of interviews with industry leaders whose stories highlight strategies that build purpose-driven cultures, engage and retain top talent, develop drivers that create high-performance teams, and connect people to the vision of your company. Join us to hear from game-changing, talented leaders whose paths make a difference at work and at home.
Ralph Spect is the author of Building a Corporate Soul. And when I first heard the title of his new book that just came out, I had to visit with him. And I tell you what, I wasn't disappointed. See, he's developed a soul system, which is a framework that powers culture and success in any size of business. And I'm anxious to hear him talk because after 2 decades with McCann Erickson, a global leader in marketing in various executive roles, he was a founding partner of Spark 44, which is an innovative industry-first joint venture with Jaguar Land Rover. Under his leadership as CEO, Spark 44 grew to 1,200 people with businesses in 18 countries. His driving vision is to make soulless corporations a thing of the past. Welcome, Ralph Spect. Ralph, I've been looking forward to getting a chance to visit with you. I guess it's been a couple of months ever since the thought of your book coming out, which was in you and I first connected in the fall. And my understanding is your book, Building Corporate Soul, not only did it hit the stands just in the last weeks, you are already on the Amazon bestseller list in 3 different countries. Congratulations to you.
Well, thanks, Mike. I think it's something that I never expected. I mean, when I was asked by Fast Company Press to finalize the launch date, they offered 22/2/22, and I said, well, that's the number that you can't miss. I mean, that only happens once in my life. And so I said, well, we're going to launch it on that day. And I mean, as a first-time author, you don't know what to expect, but you have the privilege from Amazon to get real-time data in many facets. And the publisher's happy. I'm happy because it made Amazon bestseller in the US, in the UK, and in Germany. And it actually did 6 rankings in the hot new release, and 2 of them I'm very proud of. One is the #1 new release in corporate governance, which I think is really where it should be. And the other one I was surprised about was the #1 release in quality control, which, if you think about it, corporate culture is a great means for quality control, but on a different level than just looking at numbers.
Yeah, well, if you talk about quality control, it's one of the favorite things that I love to talk about is the difference within leading a team between having them comply with guidance, governance, whatever, but versus being committed to it, compliance versus commitment. And your book addresses how do you move somebody literally from compliance into commitment in a profound way.
Well, thank you very much. I think commitment is one of the most undervalued resources that businesses have, because I mean, let's be honest. I mean, in the world of business, what you're dealing with and what you're faced with is constraints all the way along. You ain't got no time. You ain't got not enough budget, not enough people, the right people, and whatever, whether it's retail, wholesale, production, manufacturing, anything. So there's always a constraint on something. And there's actually one thing that you can tap into in the world of plenty, and that's commitment. But it's a question of how you approach the way you run your business. And if you approach it in a way that takes people with you, that allows people to, well, join the spirit, join the idea, and join the thinking, and join the task, and commit to it. I mean, people who walk the extra mile, who do things that you didn't expect. And I mean, when I wrote the book, it was inspired by people sending me messages of the teams that I worked with and that I had the honor to hire and work with for a number of years. And there was one element in these statements that I received that said, well, you actually made us accomplish things that we never thought we were capable of. And the only reason why that was possible was because there was a bond between us and a sense that we were doing the right thing, and there was a huge commitment that was built up. And yeah, it can move mountains.
Yeah, and so for those who haven't had a chance to listen to or read about your bio, your track record, you've had some stints in leadership at some really key organizations between McCann and Jaguar Land Rover. Tell our listeners a little bit about the companies you've worked with and what your roles were.
Well, I had the pleasure to work with McCann Erickson and the McCann World Group for 22 years, which is quite a long time in advertising. Everybody thinks people come and go. I didn't. The reason I didn't was I bought into the mantra of the organization, which is truth well told, which I thought was a particularly well thought through statement. And I climbed up the ranks, became a managing director in the late 90s of the last century. Interesting to say it like that. Worked on global accounts, predominantly led local offices. Finally, worked with Momentum, which is a McCann World Group brand, as CEO for the German-speaking markets. And then one night in October 2010, I got a call from a former colleague of mine, Steve Wolford, who was deeply involved in lots of automotive activities. And he said, well, here's an opportunity that might not come ever again anywhere else. And this is, I'm tasked with founding a joint venture agency for Jaguar and Land Rover globally, and we'll start working with the Jaguar brand. Are you interested? And well, the rest is history. I obviously said yes, and when things were finally confirmed in February 2011, the 5 founders and myself, so 5 founders, we were tasked with setting up a global agency in 4 locations within 3.5 months, which we did, and developed it for the Jaguar brand to 270 people in 3 years. And when we were about to get out to the open market, as you will, Jaguar Land Rover said, well, actually, before you get any other clients on board, we would appreciate if you could take care of the Land Rover brand, and who could say no to that.
Yeah.
So when I left in 2019, at the end of 2019, we were like 1,200 people in 18 countries across the world, and what a powerful organization, and my heart's still with people. Yeah,
and so you had a chance to actually live this message that you're writing about now. What I love about the heart of your book is that you use this word shared based upon these principles, but that you call the soul system. It's shared purpose, shared understanding, and shared behavior. And when you look at those 3 sort of platforms or pillars that you spin around, what I love about it is it moves it away from being a concept, because the word culture and purpose is, it's like Deming came up with the word quality, back in the 60s or whatever, which changed in revolution, but then it became so used that it started losing its meaning as something special, right? And then we saw the same thing happening with the word partnership. We're going to partner, right? We saw that move. Well, the word that was in vogue was the focus on culture. Well, your book helps to define really what culture is within an organization, I think, in a practical, pragmatic way. What are your thoughts behind what the culture of an organization is?
Well, I mean, I think you started your question by saying, you were able to live your approach during your time with Spark 44, the Jaguar Land Rover joint venture. It's true, but is as much as the approach lived with me, then I live with the approach. Because there is no such thing as there's the leader who knows everything and who can just make it happen. I still remember when we were the 5 founders, when we were about to set up the company, we sat in an office in London. And as we got the green light to go ahead, we were like, okay, so we asked ourselves, what culture do we want to have in this company? And there was silence in the room, because it's difficult to write that up and say, well, we want this and that and the other. So after like a long minute of silence, we were like, okay, let's flip the question and ask, which culture and which behaviors do we not want to have, do we not want to see in the organization? And because all of us were in our mid-40s to mid-50s, so we all had been around for a while, answering that question was very easy. Within 15 minutes, all the flip charts were full, and we organized the elements, and then worked from that. And that, I think, was the foundation to build a culture that was able to live it. And as you asked, I mean, the word shared is so critical, because we've all seen purpose statements that are crafted like nothing else. Mm-hmm. And they read well and they sound well and everything is perfect. But when you then ask people inside an organization what the purpose of the firm is, they look at you with open eyes and don't have an open mouth and don't have an answer. Mm-hmm. And the simple truth is, and that's why the word shared is so important for the whole thing, a purpose is useless if it isn't shared by the executive team, the leadership team, and it's also useless if it's not shared with all the stakeholders, predominantly the employees. And you can share it, of course. You can tell people what you think and what you think this means, but you have to turn it into actions. And I think that is the part where most organizations struggle. And the book's about celebrating those organizations that found a way to align the behaviors, the principles by which they run their business with the purpose of the organization, and take their people with them. And the good news is there are many who are doing it already, but obviously it's not the majority. You look at the EY study, the business case for purpose, where they've interviewed, I think, 5,000 people, 5,000 executives. And only 84% of them say, well, you got to have purpose is essential for the business, but only 50% say it's reflective, or our business strategy is reflective of our purpose, and only 38% say our people know what it is and live by it. Mm-hmm. So that gap needs to be closed, because as we were starting out on compliance as commitment, you can't achieve organization-wide commitment without clarity of purpose, but also not without the ability to share it in a way that people understand what it means to them in their function, in their part of the organization, and for the greater good.
Yeah, and so with the people that I've been interviewing over the course of the last 18 months, the leaders I've talked to always ask, how do you define the word culture? And what's been interesting is what's come out of that are two words. It is how the people within the organization think and act. Yeah. It's how they think and act. That is the culture. It's not what you want it to be. It is based upon those two things.
Yeah, and that's why in the second layer, which I call shared understanding, there's the usual 3: vision, mission, values. Mm-hmm. But I've added a 4th one, which I call spirit.
I was moving us in that direction, because I've heard mission, vision, value is something that's a mantra that I heard for years. This is the first time I've heard the 4th element brought into it. Tell us what you mean about spirit and the importance of it.
Yeah, I think spirit is so critical because as we're talking shared purpose and shared understanding, we're basically talking about the theoretical groundwork for the culture of the organization. And we've seen values in many companies that don't mean a thing. They're very exchangeable. One of our values is innovation. We want to be the most innovative place. Yeah, fine, but that's not a value that gets anybody into any kind of behaviors, right? I mean, so the key element about spirit is, I think leaders need to think about what is the culture they want to see in their firm. Similar to our moment when we were like, well, what culture do we want to have, our flip chart moment, right? And defining the spirit that we want to see in a firm does a lot of things. It makes sure leaders feel what the words are suggesting that they have written in terms of vision, mission, and values.
Yeah, when you use the word feel and you deal with the machoism of corporate America, especially engineering, manufacturing, industrial types of settings, emotion or feeling, is that really supposed to be a part of leadership?
Well, of course. I mean, we're all human beings, and even if we often say we don't, this was a rational decision, there is no such thing as a rational decision. As
my wife's going to fuss at me for saying even left brain people have feeling and emotions. So
yeah, hopefully, and thank God that's the way it is. No, but seriously, I think if people think about what the feeling is that they want to see in their organization, a lot will change by definition. So if you then got the shared purpose and the shared understanding ready to go, then I think comes the real work. Because as we all know, you've got your strategy, it's all perfect, sounds great, looks great, and you're convinced, but then you have to take it into action. And one question I get asked a lot of times is, okay, the examples you cite in your book are like big corporation, big names. Does this also apply to a small shop? And my answer is yes, because this is not about any industry, any category of business, any size of business. It doesn't matter whether it's a company that's been founded 2 weeks ago or 200 years ago. There's no difference. The only difference might be that the company that was founded 200 years ago lost its way somewhere during those 200 years, but some have found their way back. And the book looks at those. This is like companies like Hilton Hotels or companies like Bentley Motors in the UK. And the oldest company in the book, in the Soul Index, and that's the performance index in the book, is Deloitte. And that's, I think, 145 years old British company, or in the US, American Express. Also in the top 20, a very company that's been around for quite a while. So there is no such thing. This is something you can only do when you're starting. You better do it when you're starting, because when you start scaling your company, that's when the challenges
yeah, you really can't scale, and I'll help you address that, because my background is running and leading what are considered to be small boutique companies. And I believe the message that you've been studying and writing about and chronicling is not only as important, I think it's even more important, because you have to get a lot done with fewer people. You don't have armies of resources. So you have to have people who are committed to whatever their role is, whatever the company is, because they have to be nimble. They've got to be able to move, to stretch. And they have to have a sense of being connected to you as much as they are whatever the cause is.
Yeah, I mean, when I still remember when we started the company, and I mentioned we had to hire 80 people in 4 offices: LA, London, Frankfurt, Shanghai, and hiring 80 people for a company that doesn't exist yet. And is about to find its way, is a challenge. And I still remember we had, because we didn't have an office at the time, because all of these things were happening parallel, so the interviews took place in a coffee shop. And it was interesting. It was actually 2 groups of people that were interviewed, or it was easy after the interviews to put them into 2 buckets. There was one group of people who were fascinated by the potential of being part of building something. And there was another group of people who asked, so, okay, that sounds interesting. Do you have a job description? And our response was, well, no, because we are actually looking for people who are ready and prepared to write their job descriptions themselves together with us. Because this is in the making, and we got to develop it to the vision that we had at the time. So I think this is innate energy that you feel in startup companies is a true value. When you scale, it's something where it's tough to maintain that. I mean, I mentioned we were 270 people in year 3, and then the Land Rover business came on top, and out of our 6 offices by then, we moved into, I think, 16 within a few months again. And it's tough to do that and keeping the culture. And even if you're a very strong culture company that we were at the time, this doesn't happen automatically. You have to do a lot, and it takes time.
Yeah, out of curiosity, what's the biggest impediment that you experienced as you were trying to scale, going through the different thresholds that you have to break as you're scaling people? Were there anything you look back retroactively and realize that these were some impediments that we had to kind of punch through?
Well, the speed of growth that we had to deal with was a challenge. It was definitely a challenge. And I mean, the biggest office that we had when I left had like 300 people. And when we fought this Land Rover transition, I think it had 60. So from 60 to 300 in like record time is quite something. And you need to have leaders, you need to find leaders. And I still remember we were not happy with the leader we had at the time, and we needed to replace.
Thanks for joining us today on Lighting the Path, Strategies for Tomorrow's Leaders. If anything in this podcast speaks to you, if I've challenged you, or if you want to spend time digging into this subject a little deeper, or if you disagree with me, reach out. My contact information is on our website, lightingthepath.net, or email me at mike@mikelejeune.com. Also, look for me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect our networks. Keep lighting the path for those who choose to follow you. It's more than a responsibility. It's an honor.